You're listening to the Gospel Light Radio Show. Shout it out, question.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the portion of the broadcast where I have a question from my social media platform called Shout It Out. And we want to pose this.
Doing real well. How are you doing tonight? I wish you'd given me a more challenging one, Stevie. I spent most of yesterday researching this answer and quite a bit of last night writing and giving it as much thought and consideration as I could, because it is a serious question. It is a serious issue dealing with this. And I want to make a couple of disclaimers and some reminders to those of us or to those who are in the audience. And if you're on Facebook, you can see the slides that I've got in a screen share. A couple of things is, number one, like most of the questions we get on this show, this isn't an anonymous question. Don't know anything about who submitted it or the question. Don't know if they're male, female, their age, or even their church affiliation. And then I know nothing of this person's views. I know nothing of their politics about abortion or anything else, really, for that matter. And taking this question at face value, there are lots of ways we could look at it, lots of ways we could answer it. And what I'm going to not do is be looking at reasons why abortion is right or wrong or indifferent. And for those who are of the legal mind, I used to be a legal assistant. I was a justice major and a history minor. Not going to be looking at anything to do with why Roe versus Wade was good precedent, bad precedent, should be overturned, or anything like that. Now, what I did with this was I submitted the question. I passed it around to some friends, some of them on social media. I talked to my wife about it, and there's a sample of the replies of the question to the question that I got. And I looked at our Shout It Out page on Facebook. And here's just a sampling of some of the answers that I got, where this one just says, love them both. As has been said, both the mothers and the children need protection and help. Let women know they matter as much as their unborn children. Restore the concept of the sanctity of marriage and marriage bed, et cetera, et cetera. This one says, to be gracious, this is much a larger issue than the life of the unborn. How do we as a church address the circumstances that led to the choice to murder a child? And as we are we ready to support unwed mothers? Are we going to help with adoption? How do we help young men and women underestimate the value of their bodies beyond immediate gratification? How do we deal with the poverty? And the list could go on, and that person's right, it could. And continuation of what that last person said, the SCOTUS ruling pushes authority back to the states via the 10th Amendment. It is up to the states to decide how to handle the act, and regardless, more lives are involved than that of the child. And this is from somebody that I actually know, who said, I disagree with the ruling, right? Too many other rulings are based on the same interpretation of the 14th Amendment that we would not want overturned. So my answer may be better suited to where we can find common ground. What is the goal? Coercing someone into a situation that they do not want to serve your God. The opposition does not see it the way you do. Now, remember this common ground comment, because I'm going to come back to that towards the end. Now, I got to thinking about the question and wondered if maybe some of these folks who are giving their answers aren't misunderstanding it, because I look at the answer, they want to know the Christian stance to answer those in opposition to the ruling. So it's not necessarily speaking to their views on abortion. And because there are a few points that we'll be looking at some opinions. I have made it, here's some disclaimers that I want to put out. I make it a point not to preach politics from the pulpit or the classroom. Some churches have done that in the past. I make it a point not to. At election time, I do preach on passages like 1 Timothy chapter 2, discussing the Christian's responsibility to government. But there are some issues that'll straddle the fence between politics and religion. Abortion is one of those issues. Same-sex marriage, things like that, those do straddle the fence. Now, my personal views on abortion are no secret to anybody who knows me, but for this discussion, I'm really attempting to leave my views on abortion out of it for my talk tonight, as well as my thoughts on the SCOTUS decision, but I do have a little bit of editorializing towards the end. Now, as I researched this, I looked online, and this is from the Christian Chronicle, which is a paper affiliated with the Churches of Christ out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I think it's actually published out of Oklahoma Christian University. The headline, Christians react to U.S. Supreme Court decision overturning Roe versus Wade. And in the article was this quote, that Julie Bruton fears the ruling may polarize people even more after 2 years of social unrest and a global pandemic that have left communities divided. And I hadn't really thought of it from that angle. Given all the social unrest we went through with COVID and the mask mandates and the pros and the cons of that, and then the arguments over the vaccine, and then add to that the George Floyd murder up in Minneapolis that happened as all this was really, we were getting to the thick of the pandemic. We've had a lot happening, not just here, but around the world. And I got to thinking when Lawrence versus Texas was decided in 2003, and that's the case that struck down sodomy laws, we didn't see this kind of reaction that we're seeing now, where pro-life pregnancy centers are getting vandalized. They're getting, I think a couple of them have been burned. And then when Oldrefeld versus Hodges came out, that's the case that legalized same-sex marriage. I don't remember seeing the kind of reaction we're getting now with Roe being overturned, and maybe some things like this happened and it slipped under the radar, but I don't recall that we had this kind of unrest and this kind of uprising in places. And here in Miami, I got this out of the Miami Herald on Monday of, it says, today you're hurting, on Sunday, Miami's congregation split after Roe versus Wade decisions. And I'm afraid this is going to cause some church splits. The United Methodist Church is in the process of splitting over same-sex marriage. They started it in 2020 and the pandemic put a halt to it, and they're starting to pick it up again. But as far as I can tell, it's been a fair, and I may be wrong, I'm not Methodist and I haven't kept a super close eye on it, but as far as I can tell, it's been fairly peaceful. It's been fairly amicable. They've got property and things like that that has to be dealt with from a legal perspective, and various other assets that has to be dealt with. But I don't see, and I know there's some hard feelings and there's some probably hot tempers, but I don't see them coming to blows or anything like that. So Roe versus Wade has really touched a nerve more so than anything else, to the point that our Speaker of the House was told by the Archbishop, she's Catholic, for those who don't know, as is President Biden. She was barred from receiving communion by the Archbishop of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. He sent a letter to her at the end of May of this year explaining she wouldn't be allowed communion. But just last week, she was in Rome and took communion. And it looks like, if I'm reading this right, the Pope himself gave her communion. So he basically overrode his bishop there in San Francisco, which I think is going to really cause some issues there between the Pope and the Archbishop in San Francisco. Now, what should be the Christian stance to answer those in opposition to this ruling? Here's the question. Now, there are no easy answers. I'm just going to put that up there right up front. This is a difficult issue, and it does get to be emotional. I would advise anybody who's discussing it, either at church, at work, wherever you are, try and keep the emotions out of it as much as you can. That's when decisions get made that are bad, that we decide to do things, we say things that are bad, and it gets us into a whole lot more trouble. So if you have to walk away from it, don't keep pursuing it if you can feel yourself getting really emotionally worked up. And then don't make any assumptions. A person disagreeing with the Dobbs decision does not necessarily reflect their position on abortion. Someone wanting to uphold the Mississippi law might have wanted to do that, but at the same time keep Roe intact. And there's at least one prominent person that did that, and that's Chief Justice John Roberts. Have a look at the 12-page opinion that he issued, and you can see that he was not really in favor of overturning Roe. So there's a myriad of positions on this that can be all over the map. You might have to come to a point where you agree to disagree. And I'm referring to the Dobbs decision. You may not agree that Roe versus Wade has been kicked back to the states. You may think it should have stayed a federal issue. That's something there where I think we can maybe agree to disagree, because that decision, that position really has nothing to do with abortion itself. But then it's also possible you might have to part company with people. If a church might have an official position one way or the other on abortion, let's say, or on this decision, if it bothers you that much, you might have to leave that church or leave that organization. Now, in the Churches of Christ, we happen to be autonomous. Each church takes care of its own affairs. We don't tell each other how to conduct our business. There is no church that I know of that has an actual formal position on abortion. However, I am asked it occasionally when I've interviewed with churches, and I tell them what I think. And then I think most of the people in the Churches of Christ are going to be pro-life, but I'm, I know I'm probably not 100% on that. And then this came up, the common ground. One of the sample answers I showed mentioned common ground. So what to do? Well, unplanned pregnancies are serious issues. Arguing about abortion, arguing about Roe versus Wade isn't going to change that fact. They're there. And this is where I'm going to get a little bit into editorializing as part of my answer. And I'm going to talk a little bit both to people on both sides of the issue. If you're pro-life, if you're pro-abortion, if you're pro-Roe, anti-Roe, what you consider yourself, pro-choice, whatever you consider yourself, I'm talking to everybody here at this. And I would refer people, especially if you're pro-life and you're a believer, I would refer you first of all to James chapter 2, where he asks, well, what does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. A dead faith is no good. And James makes it very clear that we have to back up faith with action. That's why faith only can't save you unless it's backed up with action. Any more than a car battery is going to do your car any good if it's dead. If it's dead, you got to get rid of it and get a new one, or at least recharge the old one. So what is to be done? Now, what I want to put here is by no means comprehensive. And as I said, this is the part where I'm going to let a little bit of my opinions out. Now, I will submit this as Exhibit A as to how not to react, especially for Christians, if somebody has an unwanted pregnancy. This is not going to win any souls. This is not going to win any friends. It's not going to do anything to approach it this way, the way the Pharisees would do, and put ourselves on a higher pedestal. Very bad approach, not just in this situation, but anytime you're dealing with someone who wants to talk about sin, talk about their weaknesses, they need a safe place. It's a bad approach. Don't go down this road. If a woman wants to carry her baby to term, and this again, if you're really pro-choice, if you're whichever side you're on, pro-life, this is for you. Help with her needs if she wants to carry it to term. There are many church-affiliated homes. There are many church-affiliated adoption agencies that can step in and help out here. We are caring about the child after birth, and there are many agencies that will do that. Help with options after birth. If she wants to keep the baby, if she wants to put it up for adoption, help her find it. Help her find those options. Help her make the best possible decision she can under these circumstances. And let's not let the fathers off the hook either. Especially if he's a minor, his family and or the father need to take responsibility. Now, I don't think they necessarily need to get married. I've seen some of those situations even in my own family, and they typically did not end well, but responsibility must be taken. Now, I'm saying that as the father of a daughter. If this happened, I would expect for the young man to take responsibility. And my daughter is an adoptee, and I'm married to an adoptee. So that's also a little bit how I look at some of this. I had a high school friend, and the reported reaction he told me of that his father had when this friend of mine got sexually active, that his father was really rooting him on and pushing it on. And I'm just going to be blunt, that was felony stupid. to do that. If your son is doing that, you need to have a talk with him and get him to start thinking right. Now, if a woman does have an abortion, now here again, my 2 cents worth here. If I know she's going to do it, I will try to talk her out of it. I'm not going to beat around the bush about that. Now, if she does go ahead and do it, then there is really no sense in condemning her. Who knows what influences she had? You need to get the whole story there. And many women do regret their decision. And so provide a safe space for people to come and talk about it. If they're thinking about it, if they've already done it, if it's bothering them, provide a safe space for them to come where they can talk about it and not be condemned, but be told that, look, Jesus loves you. God loves you. I love you. I want to help you with this situation. You can get forgiveness for any sin, any perceived wrong. Let's talk about it. Let's show them that love that Christ that Christ wants us to show for them, and put our faith into action. So that's my answer. Any questions, you can contact me on social media. Anyone else has a Bible question, you can contact Stevie or myself or any of the co-hosts, and we'll be glad to get it on the air. Thank you for this opportunity, Stevie, and we'll see you. I guess we're taking July off. We'll see you in August.